Welcome to OpenHive.JS, the podcast for all things JavaScript. I'm your host, James Snell.
I'm Matteo Collina.
Today we are talking to Philipp Dunkel, a TC39 delegate for Bloomberg, longtime JavaScripter, and one of the authors of the Temporal proposal for date and time handling, to learn more about the proposal and how it's going to benefit all of us. Why is temporal needed? What's wrong with the current date object?
What's not wrong with the current date object? Dates are sort of the only one of those built-in things that's really isn't a collection of some sort, that's mutable, and it's been causing problems.
Philipp talks us through the various issues that make date and time handling such a persistent challenge, from inconsistent rules, conflicting formats, and time zones.
Don't even get me started on time zones. It's just
time zones are horrible things. Yeah.
It's just more wrong than right.
Time zones are just plain horrible in all cases.
Yes.
Like,
Absolutely.
It's just my enemies. Like, time zones are my enemy. I don't know about you, but my enemy are time zones.
Completely disregarding JavaScript. Time zones are just horrible things. We're getting into it. You're coming with us. This is OpenHive.JS from NearForm. All right, welcome to OpenHive.JS, our podcast on all things JavaScript and with NearForm guests. I'm James Snell, and I'm joined today by my colleague Matteo Collina and our guest Philipp Dunkel for a chat about Temporal, the date time handling facilities for JavaScript that the TC39 is currently working on. We're excited to have this opportunity to chat with Philipp as we hear that Temporal is progressing nicely towards stage 3, right? It's novel and promises huge potential, and it's a major improvement over date that's been there for so long. We're keen to find out more about it, so let's go and get started. Thank you, Philipp, for joining us, and thank you, Matteo.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matteo Collina. Please follow me on Twitter at Matteo Collina, whatever, just so that you are aware. No, I wanted just to ask Philipp to introduce himself because people might not know about Philipp, so maybe we could just do that. Thank you, Philipp.
Thanks. I'm Philipp Dunkel. I'm one of the TC39 delegates for Bloomberg. JavaScripter since forever. And I'm currently working on the TC39 temporal proposal, which brings a whole new set of date and time things to JavaScript that should make life a lot better. So yeah, excited for that.
I think anything that's not the current date object is going to make life better. There's a lot of really good things in Temporal. I'm looking forward to hearing about. Philipp, you're there in London, right? And how long have you been with Bloomberg?
I moved to London for Bloomberg in 2014, and yeah, ever since, and really enjoying it.
Right on, very good.
I just wanted to jump in now on Temporal, and just ask Philipp where did it all begin?
Well, difficult question. Where it began for me was with raising my hand at the wrong time. But the proposal itself is one by Maggie Pint, Matt Johnson, who've since married, and Brian Turlson. I think they're all with Microsoft, but I'm not sure. And Maggie and Matt are actually heavily involved in Moment.js as well. And so they know this space really well and know all the pain points and all the things that are currently bad with dates and times in JavaScript, and know all the sort of ins and outs via their work on Moment and collaborating toward Luxon and so on. And they started this off to actually get proper date and time handling into the standard language so that you wouldn't have 50 different versions of Moment.js being bundled into web apps anymore. So yeah, that's how all of this started. And there is actually a great sort of link from the temporal proposal home with all the motivations, which talks a bit about sort of all the design features and sort of the goal of them. So yeah, go have a look at the repo. It's on github.com/tc39/proposal-temporal, and yeah, have a look around.
Yeah, we'll make sure we put the link to the proposal in the show notes. There's also some a couple of fabulous talks that Maggie has given on temporal. Going back a ways, we'll have to find the links for those and put those up as well. She's done an amazing amount of work on this.
Yes, I mean, she is definitely the queen of dates and times, without any doubt. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm more along the lines of court jester in comparison.
So one thing that definitely has come up, before is, why is temporal needed? What's wrong with the current date object, right?
What's not wrong with the current date object? I mean, it starts out really with a whole bunch of simple things, right? Like, first of all, it's mutable. So if you have a reference to a date object and somebody reuses that to do calculations and changes its value, you're, the same reason why you'd like to have other things immutable, right? Sort of like a string is immutable, right? It's a primitive. You can't change it, so therefore you're fine storing it and making and having that your own, having that, right? And the same thing goes for numbers and booleans and so on. And dates are sort of the only one of those built-in things that's really that isn't a collection of some sort, that's mutable, and it's been causing problems, right? That's one thing that's wrong with it. The second thing that's wrong with it, it's just more or less wrong. As in, if you go to January 31st, right, and you add 1 month, so you say date.getMonth, and then get that value and do date.setMonth, your value plus 1. Well, guess what? You get usually March 2nd, which is just wrong. Okay, it's just,
Right.
And then if you think about time zones, don't even get me started on time zones. It's just
time zones are horrible things. Yeah,
it's just more wrong than right.
Time zones are just plain horrible in all cases.
Oh yes,
like it's just my enemies. Like time zones are my enemy. I don't know about you, but my enemy are time zones.
completely disregarding JavaScript. I mean, time zones are just horrible things.
Yeah, but it's JavaScript, and we live in a JavaScript world. And the word is JavaScript. Then I don't know. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I fight against time zone every single day of my life at this point. I don't know. We are scattered so much around the globe that it's kind of problematic to manage.
To be honest, time zones as a thing are horrible. You're completely right. But if you think about it in terms of if you can ignore sort of the edge cases, like for example Morocco adding a second period of wintertime in the middle of their summertime because of Ramadan, right? If you ignore that kind of edge case that will never get right because they decide that like 2 weeks in advance and tell nobody about it, given temporal, working with time zones is actually really nice. So they're much less. I'm using the polyfill that we have to sort of, in my own experiments. So for that, it makes time zones a breeze. So yeah.
So aside from just time zones, there's of course other calendar formats. Hebrew calendar and some of these others. Does temporal include support for those? Because I know those have always been a challenge with using date.
Yep. As a matter of fact, that is one of the things that's been keeping us up. So originally we had a plan to, I think with the April meeting, or was it the March meeting? Whatever, to advance to stage 3. And we decided to push that for a bit. And the reason is actually calendar integration. because we realized we really want first-class calendars integration out of the box. So that means not just saying you go into date format and format a temporal object given a different calendar, it'll actually render correctly. It actually goes further than that. It goes into details like if you have a temporal object with a Hebrew calendar and you add 1 month, then it doesn't do that in the Gregorian calendar and give you the equivalent date back. It actually goes 1 Hebrew month in the future, right? And the Hebrew months usually have 30 days. So you if you were to actually just use something like date, you'd always get the wrong thing because the months just don't overlap properly with the Gregorian calendar. So we wanted that to be proper. So basically all the calendars that are supported by ECMA 402, which is the internationalization part of the standard, will be supported by temporal as well. And there's actually even the ability to add custom calendars. So you can implement an object that that does the translation between the Gregorian calendar and it itself, and you can have your own calendar going, which actually has some use cases. If you think about, for example, the New York Stock Exchange, where the trading day ends at 5 p.m. New York time, right? And then any trade that happens after 5 p.m. New York time is actually part of the next trading day, right? So you can do a calendar that mimics that correctly.
Well, so there we go, Matteo. We can just have a calendar that has no concept of time zones, and we'll just, everything will just work out.
Yeah.
Right on. So the spec's been being developed for a couple of years now, and I do understand that there is a polyfill. What is the state with that? How can people start playing around with temporal, and how stable is it today?
Basically, we are currently working on integrating the new calendar stuff that we've come up with into the polyfill. And in general, the polyfill has been fairly stable, and there haven't been a lot of API level changes as such. However, this is a stage 2 proposal, and stage 2 really means this is a work in progress. Okay, so yes, there is a polyfill, and it includes everything but the calendar right now. And yes, you can play with it and try things out and work with time zones and all that. But it's not a polyfill that should go anywhere near any production code right now, right? Stage 2 by definition means we haven't done and finished our job yet, right? So the API will change, and it will break you, and it will do weird things, and there might be still broken bits in the polyfill, and all of that. So until we hit stage 3, it's basically, yes, go and play with it and sort of see what the future holds, but don't bring it anywhere near any code base that is meant for actual use.
And I have to assume that the various VM implementers, V8 and others have, if they given indications that they do plan on implementing and integrating into the engine so that the polyfills are not required.
Actually, yes. So the way the standardization stuff works, when it hits stage 3, that's basically the mandate for engine implementers to start putting it into the browser, into their engine, right? So when you hit stage 3, they start implementing, and given that we have as sort of champions of the proposal, we have / working behind the scenes, we have people from Microsoft, from starting it out with Maggie Pint and so on. But we also have been working with Shane Carr of Google. He's doing a lot of the ECMA 402 work and sort of that interface. We have a collaborator from Apple. We have people all over the place. So the sentiment is really, we're just waiting to get the solid, to get it to stage 3, and as soon as that happens, all of the vendors will start implementing this. So that's at least the sentiment right
Okay. So, yeah, I guess
now. Yeah.
kind of the one thing you mentioned earlier, the hope is for people not to have 50 different versions of Moment in their in their module path. The risk is that they would have temporal and those 50 versions of Moment out there. Are there do you know if there's plans on in Moment to embrace temporal, or to maybe deprecate a Moment so that to start moving people over to temporal once it's out, or is that just not defined at this point?
It's undefined at this point, in the sense that I haven't heard of any plans by the actual Moment people to do this, but I do have a colleague that is sort of in playing around with temporal, trying to write an API level compatible thing based on temporal, so that it's a one-to-one substitution of that wrapper and Moment.js.
Right.
Okay, so that you can basically drop Moment.js and just not change any of your code, and then bring that in. But as I said, that's sort of experimental, and looking at, can we do that, and that kind of thing, more than anything concrete at this point. But I as I said, I don't have any information from the Moment people. But given that Maggie is one of the Moment maintainers, and she's also a champion on this proposal, I wouldn't be surprised if they come back and say, yeah, actually, we're going to do this tomorrow.
Nice. So, I guess this actually goes back to one of the questions that I had received before, about a year ago or something around this. Is why is temporal? If you look at temporal versus Moment, right? How do they compare, and why not just use Moment? Right.
Okay, that's a question that you should probably ask Maggie and the Moment people. But here's what I've gathered from asking them the same question. Okay.
Right.
Moment made a lot of mistakes in API design when they created Moment. Okay, and this is not me saying that, although I agree, but this is the Moment people saying this, right?
Right.
And that's why one of the key people of Moment.js has actually gone out and created Luxon, right? Luxon is sort of where he said, if I had to do it over again, this is what Moment.js would look like, right? And then based on the work that happened with Moment, and then its child, so to speak, Luxon, right? We then went into temporal and started working on that. So you could really say that temporal is sort of the grandchild of Moment.js, right? Via Luxon, right? And a lot of the learning from what was bad design in Moment and what was bad design in Luxon informed the design for temporal. So yeah, I guess it's an evolution thing, right? So for the same reason, why don't we live in trees anymore? Well, because we evolved. I think that's the same reason. Why not just use Moment? Because we've evolved.
Nice. Yeah, it's it kind of goes back to the whole thing. We're not throwing away the prototype, but it's always good to learn those lessons, from the prototype. And there's Moment has always been a fantastic piece of work, but it does have its warts in the API design and those kind of things. For me, it's always been at least it's not date.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at it, okay, date was created way back when in '97, right? It was basically, we need something to represent dates. What do we do? Let's just implement something like Java util date, right? At the time, right? This was Brendan Eich doing it when designing JavaScript originally, right? And And a lot of the design decisions he made, right, ended up being warts, or at least some of them. It's a great language, but it also has some warts, right? And we've been working over the last, 20 odd years to actually make the language better, right? And that's TC39 has stepped up to the plate. And if you think of async await and, and iterators and all of that goodness that comes with ES 2020/ES6, right? The language is evolving and being better defined. So
Well, are you sure?
well,
Let me ask you already. Let me interrupt
okay.
you and put you on the spot. Are you sure that all the latest things are not words as well? Like, I'm joking a little bit, half joking at least. But there is certain stuff being done that were not really took a long time to implement them and get spread out.
I think that's a whole another podcast there, Matteo.
Yeah, I know. I just want to play devil's advocate
Okay.
there, but before the stages approach was done, there was some stuff that was probably be better stay on the burner for a little bit longer to some
I mean,
extent.
I totally agree with that, okay? And I'm not saying that everything that TC39 does is perfect, okay? But it's a better approach than somebody in their basement just making a random judgment call, right? And as you said, we've added the stages approach to make this sort of more rigorous and improve our own process, right? And from that, I actually see temporal as a proposal to be sort of an example of how we want to do this, right? First, we made Moment.js. And when I say we, I mean we as a community, right? We made Moment.js and we learned from that. And it was better than what it was before, right? And then we made Luxon and we learned from that, okay? And then we said, okay, now sort of after years of playing with this and trying this and learning from what is good and what is bad, now we're ready to put it into the spec sort of where it has to remain backward compatible forever because we can't break the web. And now we're going forward and actually creating the specification, having learned all of those lessons. And we're taking that through a multi-stage approach that is TC39, where basically stage one is, yes, this is something we should do in general. Stage two is, let's figure out how to do it exactly. And stage three is sort of like, okay, let's implement this and put it into the language or put it into the implementations. And stage four is, now it's part of the language and any engine that claims to implement JavaScript has to have this, right? So we've really taken this stepwise incremental learning approach to avoid warts to the extreme, right? And I think that's and proposals in general are getting more and more of this review. So I hope that we'll avoid more warts in the future. I mean, yes, there are features in JavaScript that got added with ES6 that I'm not fond of, okay? And if you ask my colleagues, and I won't name any of those features today, they can tell you exactly what they are because I've been complaining about them ever since ES6 was a glint in the TC39i. But I think, by actually collaborating across a lot of stakeholders in TC39, we have a good shot of, making a language that actually is a lot better and that is actually constantly improving. And
I have to. I absolutely agree. The staging process for the proposals that has emerged is I think really improved the process overall. Made it much more systematic and makes it far more likely that what's going to come out at the end is practical and usable.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of why we did the polyfill to begin with, right?
Right.
So our plan right now is, before we even ask for stage 3, we want to have the polyfill be actually feature complete and everything be done. And we'll then be releasing it out as an actual polyfill, sort of once we think we've hit the API. And at that point, I'm going to hit both of you up to sort of spread the word, so that we can actually get people knocking on this thing, right? And take it for a real test drive. Sort of once we think we're ready to go to stage 3, and we'll then wait for the feedback and, you know, improve even more sort of once we've gone out to the back to the entire community, right?
So that, you know, that does raise, you know, some a couple of points here, you know, about, you know, kind of when we can see this being available in Node. Now, I did notice that the polyfill is written to require ES6 modules. All right. So one of the key questions there for Node developers is ESM going to be required, or is this going to be usable from a common JS perspective? So.
Great question. I love ES6 modules. That's why I use them. But actually, if you look closely, what happens when building the polyfill is actually that it gets, I use rollup to actually create a single file. And I use that for the actual polyfill. So using rollup, you just get one single common JS file, and that's it. And I think we're going to do that when we release as well, so that nobody has actually any problems without using ES6. That being said, development is just so, like, I just like modules. So in development, it makes things a lot easier. So yeah.
Right on. Okay. Well, you know, so you know, we're coming up to the time, you know, we kind of, you know, start wrapping up and stuff. But you know, kind of the one key question in terms of, you know, timeline. You mentioned before that the polyfill and the spec is not yet ready for, you know, production use. It's still a stage 2. What's the timeline for moving to stage 3 and you know getting something that somebody can use in production?
Okay. So right now, we are meeting basically every week to sort of discuss next steps and constantly working on things. There's a lot of work going on. And what's basically left over is the calendar, integrating the calendar stuff, and sort of stabilizing that. So my expectation or my hope is, that sometime in 2020, we will actually hit stage 3, right? Now, the thing is, originally I said this was going to happen in February, March, April of this year, right? So I have a great track record of being a total optimist, right? So that being said, you know, I think it's not unrealistic to say stage 3 should happen probably 2020, right? And once it hits stage 3, you know, other polyfill maintainers that maintain whole libraries of polyfills. I'm thinking of the Core.js project or LJ Harp with his polyfills and so on, right? We'll probably get something out as well, because the thing that our polyfill doesn't do, right? It doesn't go back all the way to no feature. So we still require big int, and we still require, you know, symbols to be there. So if you are working on with an engine that doesn't do that, as in a web browser, then you know, our polyfill isn't right now what you want to use. But we're working with LJ, and we're working with the Core.js people to help them sort of add that. And then, you know, basically from the moment it hits stage 3 is when you can start using this for real, with the polyfill, and then just do a feature test on whether temporal exists, and if it doesn't, then load the then post load it, right?
Okay. So yeah, I mean, usually with the typical timeline, then you know, like for V8 for picking these things up, you know, for Node being able to pick up a version of V8 that has that available without the polyfill, we're looking probably mid to late 2021. So moment for now, hopefully polyfill, you know, for temporal later this year, and then, you know, built-in intrinsic to V8 late 2021. So
I mean, V8, as you probably know, has the facility in Chrome to actually sideload JavaScript code for its as part of its module concept, so to speak.
Yep.
If some of the work by Dominic de Nicola and so on that, right? And so we might actually see it roll out quickly because there is a polyfill that works with the latest Chrome already, and they can sideload it and then sort of optimize from there. And that's something that Node could do as well if it wanted to, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And and even given the -r flag on Node, you could actually just preload it and then stop doing -r when it gets out, if that's your thing. So I think that for actual use in Node, it's sort of when it hits stage 3 is that time, because it's fairly easy to sort of to polyfill and just take out, especially since the polyfill that we're writing will have to actually pass all test 262 tests. So for those who don't know, test 262 is the ECMAScript test suite that basically certifies that an engine meets the specification. So for the polyfill to match that and pass that means that it actually does exactly what the spec says. And by doing so, it means that you can actually just remove the polyfill entirely without worrying about any, unintended consequences, so to speak.
One simple question here. How is so when this hits stage 3? Do you think it will be we will be getting it from the V8 side, or Node should ship its own implementation on 3?
Generally, features that come into the language get into Node via V8, right? So sort of the precedent is that that it's that now, but that doesn't prevent Node saying, actually, we want this sooner, so therefore we'll put it in ourselves until V8 has it, right? So this is more, the history says you get it via V8, but there is an option to opt in early for Node itself, right? So, one thing that we could do, for example, is put it behind a flag in Node, so that, we get a Node release that has -- temporal or enable temporal or whatever, right? Sort of like the Harmony flags. And that gets us a preview with the polyfill until V8 is ready with it, right? So that would be an option, but that's for Node to decide whether they want to do that or not.
Right. Yes, it's certainly not out of the question. We'd have to play with it. It's one of those things where it is so easy for userland code to to include that polyfill themselves, right? Until it's available for V8. So I'm not sure if we would pull it into core until then. But I mean, it's a discussion to be had.
The problem with polyfills is always that they make themselves they get put into code bases and then never get removed. So one of the nightmares that I'm dealing with, or that I've dealt with, was polyfilling promises, and we're still using the library because we can't rip it out properly, right? So when you say it's so easy to polyfill in userland,
yeah.
But honestly, if we can avoid that, then yes, absolutely.
Yep. Well, we deal with promised polyfill nightmares all the time. So
yeah. So you see.
So, all right. So so we are coming to the end of our time here, and I'm just looking here at the notes, and it says conversation should conclude with a discussion of ambitions and vision for the subject. And I have no idea if the subject is the project or or Philip. So we'll say both. What Philip, what are your ambitions for temporal and your vision, and just kind of just a personal ambition for yourself sometime over the next few months? Something you want to do.
So in terms of temporal specifically, I think if we can actually get this to stage 3 this year, and that means hitting stage 4 in 2021, right? That would be absolutely amazing. I mean, because at that point, just with the time zone stuff, and with the between time zone and calendars, really, and date maths and whatnot, we will be unlocking so much potential. So actually writing a calendaring app or something like that will be so much easier, right? So that's just going to be huge. Yeah, but then it's sort of done, and we actually have to sort of wait around for people to find any warts and iron them out. So, this work is never really done, right? That's the problem with it. In terms of personal ambitions, and I'm actually engaged at work in a great project. So I have some, I'm hoping to make some real strides there. And in terms of sort of publicly consumable stuff, I think the next thing that's going to be huge is records and tuples. There's another proposal by a colleague of mine, Robin Rickard, about records and tuples, which is basically a structure that is immutable, right? So like an immutable object and an immutable array, it's sort of like immutable JS in the language natively. And there are some really awesome things that you can do with that. For example, cheap/free triple equals, right? Deep equality.
Right.
And, I'm just scratching the surface there. So in terms of what's consumable for the future, in terms of ambitions, visions, I think that's going to be sort of another big item on the let's make JavaScript better list. And that's going to be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the tuples records are definitely going to be interesting. I've taken a look through that proposal, and I know that they're actually fairly controversial. There's quite a few people that are looking at it and just really questioning whether it should be added. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. I absolutely agree with you that there's some really interesting use cases for it, and some nice things you can do. But that conversation, it's going to be interesting to see that develop.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that's why we have TC39 stage system, is so that we can have that discussion in a structured way. But yeah, as I said, on the question of vision/ambition, I really want records and tuples. Okay, they're awesome.
Nice. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Philipp, for the time today. Definitely best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Definitely looking forward to some of these conversations.
Thank you, Philipp.
I can't wait for Temporal done.
Yeah, I can't either, because then I can go back to sleep for once.
This has been OpenHive.JS, the podcast for all things JavaScript from NearForm. Join us next time for more insights into the open source and JavaScript communities. Until then, I'm James Snell. Thanks for listening.